do this all day. A bunch of a-holes. Truth is, I am Iron Man.
Hello and welcome to the Infinity Saga and beyond. I am the Watcher, Jordan, and with me today is the Watcher, Jack Sewpersaud. How are you?
Good to be back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and talking What If. I know you said you were really looking forward to this last time I had you on.
Yeah, it seems it was really, I was really hyped up for it, and I've got to say, lived up to it in the premiere.
For the people that don't remember, we had Jack on about 2 episodes ago, I think it was, or maybe the last episode, just to talk Avengers Campus, because he went to Avengers Campus in Disneyland, so that was fun to talk about. But today he's actually going to be on talking about a full episode of a show, so looking forward to getting your thoughts on that. We are going to be talking What If, and it's episode 1, What If Captain Carter were the first Avenger? Directed by Andrews, written by A.C. Bradley, originally released August 11th, 2021, and the running time was 33 minutes, and it released on Disney+. The synopsis: when Steve Rogers is seriously injured, Peggy Carter becomes the world's first super soldier. So before we get into the plot, scene by scene, just your overall general thoughts on what if Captain Carter was the first Avenger?
I mean, I absolutely loved it. The animation style, I'm a big fan of animation and just in general, you know, as a fan of Disney and just I always loved animation. So seeing how beautifully animated it was, it just looked incredible in every single scene. And the story was awesome. I love how they kind of pinpoint sort of the nexus event or whatever you want to call it in the show. Like, this is exactly what we're going to talk about. And then I thought, you know, it was funny how at all the right parts and how it paid homage to the original movie that it's inspired by. It not only met my expectations, but just surpassed them in every single way.
Yeah, I thought this was, look, we've gotten looks at this show since 2019, I think it was the first time they unveiled like that Captain Carter image, and the first time I saw it was people in D23 taking like shoddy videos and pictures of it. And I remember a lot of people being concerned about the animation, but I thought this animation looked incredible, especially during action scenes. It looks really good. I think the guy that they got to voice Cap sounded so much like Chris Evans that it was not jarring at all, because that's one of the things that can be. But overall, I think that we're going to get better episodes. Critics have seen the first 3, and I know some people said this one was the weakest. So if that's the case, then I'm looking forward to what 2 and 3 are. I've heard episode 3 is some sort of Avengers murder mystery type of thing, which would be fun. But that is our general thoughts on that. So let's go ahead and kind of get more in the weeds with it. So the plot, we start with, World War II. This is taking place around the time of, during the events of Captain America, the First Avenger. But I think we actually get the intro with Watu, right? First, he gives like a monologue.
Yeah. He gives sort of a monologue about, just this is the moment where everything changes. Like it starts on the scene where you're about 20-30 minutes into Captain America, the First Avenger, where they're actually in the lab. Steve Rogers is about to take the super soldier serum, and instead of going up to the observation deck, Peggy Carter chooses to stay on the floor. And so that's what sets up all of these things in motion.
And that's what's interesting. I guess because she decides to stay down there, everybody decides it, even the Hydra spy does. Because I was wondering when they said, this is the moment that's going to change it. I was like, that's interesting. Why would this one thing change it? But I'm guessing then, since she stayed down there, everybody stayed down there is the idea, because I was wondering, I kind of at first took it like she's going to stay down there, everybody's going to go up, and maybe she's able to stop something or jump in there beforehand. That's kind of what happens, right? Like this guy is going to still try to blow up the area down there. It gets, we also get Steve getting shot.
Right.
And then the guy is going to run away. Peggy is able to, kind of take him down. And then there's limited time to complete the procedure because it already started. And, Howard Stark pretty much says it's got to be Peggy because nobody else is around to really do it.
Yeah, he's the button guy. That's what he says.
Yeah.
He's the button guy.
Yeah, he's the button guy. That's all he does. There was another guy. Well, Steve was still injured, and then we had. Was there another guy that was supposed to? I'm trying to remember now. There was a guy kind of ordering.
The
somebody
commander,
to go,
I think.
He couldn't go. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then she comes out of there, and she's the Captain Carter, as they will call her going forward. Not as catchy as Captain America, I guess. But the SSR leader, John Flynn, takes over for Chester Phillips, who was killed and right before Rogers gets shot. And yeah, so we now have this whole setup that one decision that she made because she wanted to make sure, I guess she was still right. She didn't want to. It's pretty much what we're led to believe, that like her relationship with him made it where she felt more comfortable being down there with him, right?
Right.
Which is interesting. And that's what's cool about these what ifs, is sometimes it can be something super small that kind of goes off on this trajectory, or it can be something bigger. And that is definitely something just super small, one decision that then opens up this whole parallel. And what I wanted to kind of talk about here is this show, it seems, is due to the events of the end of Loki. So if you haven't watched Loki, we're going to be talking about those last scenes of Loki season 1 as well, because it's going to tie into some of our theories at the end of this episode. So then it kind of, this is 33 minutes long, so they don't have the 2.5 hours that the first Avenger does. So, right, it skips all the way into Norway, where Johann Schmidt, or the Red Skull, is attaining the Tesseract the way he does in the movie, where he goes to Norway, goes to the little like wooden door, and is able to find Tesseract. And when Flynn, who's the leader now of the SSR, is refusing to send anybody to stop him, Howard Stark gives Captain Carter, a costume and shield made out of vibranium. And the suit is very reminiscent of a character that many people may not know, but is one of my, I'm not going to say favorite Marvel characters, but just the idea of Captain Britain is really cool. Oh, yeah. I love it. I love Captain Britain. I really want to dig in more. That's like one of the things that's on my to-do list on Marvel Unlimited, is to just read a lot of Excalibur and Captain Britain stuff. So I'm hoping for the day that they bring him in, and I think that's why they named her Captain Carter still. I think they're very hesitant to, I guess, have named her Captain Britain.
Yeah, just keeping that door open, I suppose.
Yeah. I guess then they could think it would confuse people later if they introduce it, because you would think True. They would just be like, that was a cartoon, other universe. Like you wouldn't think that would be a big deal, but yeah, interesting. But so Flynn promotes Peggy to a combat role, and she becomes Captain Carter, and she also attacks a Hydra convoy and is able to successfully retrieve the Tesseract and Aram Zola, who they usually get at the spot of the train heist, but this
Right.
time they get them earlier. What was your thoughts on, I guess, Captain Carter as a whole so far, as she's, and, I guess the limited time they have to tell the story, how fast they had to move through that?
Yeah, well, up to that point, I want to talk about that combat scene, like you said, beautifully animated, as she's like jumping off Brandenburg Gate in front of the convoy and just like experimenting with all of her newfound strength and everything, like where she flips the car over. And
that was really good. Yeah.
And it feels like, even though it's a cartoon, it feels so genuine, because it's like, yeah, like if I was able to do that, like flipping over a car that's full of basically Nazis and doing that, like I would be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Let me do it again. Like that would be my reaction. It felt very human, despite it being a cartoon. And I loved how she just absolutely mows down everyone in that. And I also think it's interesting how she's able to recover the Tesseract in that instance. And because, that's something that we don't get to see in the first Avenger. And it sets a lot more kind of maybe weird, but really interesting plot points in motion in the show, especially with Howard Stark.
Yeah, and what I thought was interesting too is that I know some people are probably complaining online the way that they do, of like, oh, so she just automatically is really good at doing all this stuff, right? But let's not forget, she was like kind of already skilled and trained in this stuff. Steve was literally a scrawny dude who just learned how to like be able to knock somebody out really quick by just injecting himself with the Barry Bonds steroids there. And that is so I thought it was realistic that she was able to kind of carry this out as well as she did.
Yeah, I mean, she's an agent. Like she knows how to do this
job.
stuff. Yeah.
So then, they get to a point where, Steve is talking about how his friend Bucky, we all know Bucky, is captured by Hydra Force, and, Peggy decides to stage a rescue mission. Rogers arrives to assist with that was kind of built up, in a few scenes, or hinted at a few scenes before it shows up here, of what Howard is putting together for Steve. Steve still wants to be part of the fight, so I thought that's realistic too. That was his whole reason of doing them. Obviously, he's injured, but he's still thinking, I need to still be a part of the fight. Well, Howard comes up with pretty much what is a prototype Iron Man suit with the Tesseract, because let's not forget, in Iron Man 2, was it Iron Man 2, right? Or which one had the Tesseract?
I think it was Iron Man 2. I believe so. It was either 2 or 3. I know it wasn't the first one. I think
it was the second one, where he's looking through his dad's notes and he's able to create the new arc reactor.
That's 2.
And he uses like I think he used the Tesseract for it. But that is kind of like an interesting thing of like Howard was then able to kind of complete his research with that and create the new suit, which they Hydra Stomper. Interesting name, but yeah. So we
Accurate,
get this
for sure.
Yeah, we get this Howard Stark kind of new Iron Man, and this was in some of the trailers and stuff where you see Peggy riding like on the back of this Iron Man Hydra Stomper thing, and I thought that was really cool too, because it gave Steve something to do, but kind of putting him in the role of Tony Stark, who was just, somebody that had a suit. Steve was always, as he says to Tony in Avengers, what are you more than a suit of armor? But at that point, that's what Steve was. But Steve was more than that, still, with his heart. And just pretty cool little moment there. Yeah, so they break out. We kind of get that same sort of scene that we get in the movie, right? But this time it's Peggy coming in to break out Bucky, Dum Dum Dugan, and the other captives. And then they go on to fight other battles until they go to the train, right? So like they kind of do everything in the same sort of order, but for different reasons. This train this time, they're going there because Red Skull's supposed to be on the train. Before it was Zola. that was on the train. Now it is Red Skull. And, Steve goes in there first as the Hydra Stomper, and it's rigged to blow up. It's like a trap, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And what happens is it blows like the train off because it's an explosion, and then we kind of get an avalanche. But Bucky survives this. This is usually where Bucky falls and then becomes the Winter Soldier. So we're seeing how this deviates even more through there. And I was starting to wonder if Steve was somehow going to become the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, we kind of see this kind of teased like the moment where Bucky falls off the train, because as soon as they're like zip lining onto the train and everything, he sort of slips and almost falls off the train, and Peggy grabs him, or Agent Carter.
That's right.
I at first I was like, when I was watching it, I was like, ooh, is this going to be the moment? Is he still going to be the Winter Soldier? And when I saw him start to fall, I was like, oh, and then he gets back up. So I thought that was a little interesting thing, like that, what I was talking about at the beginning, how all of these little scenes that they have kind of allude to other things, like in the scene before as well, after they rescue him, like you said, the scene where Steve is usually shooting over the shield and everyone else is around him.
Yes, but also, that great shot of Peggy coming out with the shield and with her gun. Yeah. Right.
And then also the kind of the allusion to after Steve gets back in the first Avenger and Bucky says, let's hear it for Captain America. Steve instead pops out of the suit and says, let's hear it for Captain Carter. And it's those little moments that make it so much more fun. I feel like this show, that you can like look at that and go like, I know what that's from. That's a reference. I understood that reference.
Yeah. That was just so many great, like you said, just little callbacks to it. But let's see, where were we on here? So the train. So Steve's kind of presumed missing or dead, I guess. So then Captain Carter and her friends, Barnes and Doom Duggan and stuff, they go ahead to Red Skull after she obtains its location from Zola. And they actually find Steve here. He is separated from the suit, right? And the suit is kind of like attached to this, like locked up pretty much. It's like locked up. And this is where we kind of get a really, I guess, weird turn with the episode is to Red Skull was trying to, take over the world. And he was using the Tesseract to open up a portal to summon in a tentacled like creature. Right. But it ends up killing him.
Almost immediately.
I thought was a fun twist. And then it's up to, Peggy and the gang to battle it and destroy it. Steve, Bucky helps Steve into the Hydra Stomper. And they only have a little bit of time for power, and that is made pretty clear when they're putting him in there because they don't have the Tesseract. And Howard Stark is supposed to be closing the portal, but Peggy has to end up sacrificing herself by entering the portal while pushing the octopus tentacle thing in there. And this is mirroring, Steve's sacrifice on the plane. A little bit more comic booky though, with the big tentacle monster and pushing it with the sword and shield. I like that she grabbed the sword too.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too, because in the first Avenger we get sort of this scene where Steve is communicating over radio to Peggy and informing her of his sacrifice. In this other instance, we see Steve, the suit runs out of power right next to as this is all happening, and he just pops out of the suit, and we still get that same line about, what, hey, you still owe me dance lessons. And she says, yep, this Saturday, right as she sacrifices herself. And it happens right in front of him too, which I think is it's not like played out even more, but it feels more meaningful, and like it feels like more sad even. I feel like even in that way, because you see this happening right in front of you, and yeah, she pushes in this tentacle monster because it's holding open the portal and sacrifices herself.
And that was one of my questions when we were, before we got to this point, was how is Peggy going to catapult to the future the way Steve did? Is that still going to happen? How's it going to happen? And it still does happen. And it happens by her going through the portal. We get kind of a mirror of this scene from Avengers, right? Where Nick Fury and Hawkeye are testing out the Tesseract, and then Loki usually shows up and stuff. But this time it's Peggy with the sword and the shield, and Hawkeye recognizes her and says, "That's Captain Carter." So they kind of tell her that the war ended 70 years ago, and we kind of get her reaction the way that we got like Steve's when he finds out that he had missed his date. And that's pretty much where the episode ends with that. We kind of get to giving his closing line, right? Which, like you said, is mentioned in the comics about how he will not interfere. He is just a warrior. And so I guess let's kind of talk about. I want to talk about a few nitpicks that I did have.
All right.
Nothing that like killed my enjoyment of the show, but what were they doing with Bucky? I don't know if anybody else, but he's got 3 or 4 fish-related lines.
Yeah, I know.
Like almost all of his lines are related to fish. I don't know why. Like when the squid's there, like somebody ordered caviar, right?
Or calamari,
calamari, yeah. And he says sardine short something at one point. And then he had another fish-related one that I forget what it was. But I was like, once I heard the first one and then I hear the other one, I was like, is that all they know to give Bucky? I felt bad for Sebastian Stan because I know a lot of people said his voice acting wasn't great in this. I think it's just he wasn't given a whole bunch to work with, unfortunately.
Yeah, because Steve isn't the main character. He's one of the main characters, but he's not like the main person in all of this. So he doesn't have that same kind of relationship with Peggy that he does with Steve. So I think it makes sense from like a human perspective that on how that works. But given how talented Sebastian Stan has been in the MCU, I know a lot of people would have wanted a lot more from him. But I can just imagine Sebastian Stan, he heads into the studio to record his lines and they're like, all right, we got 3 fish puns for you, and then you're all good to go. And he's just like, what am I doing?
Yeah, like these are just fish puns. What are we doing? The other one for me was the amount of times they reference the dance being owed, because I think what happens here is in the first Avenger, you have 2.5 hours. They probably mention it 3 or 4 times, but it's really spread out. And I think this is where it being a 30-minute show, it felt like they talk about the dance really early on. I think on the way to the facility, right?
Right. That sounds about right.
Then they mention it like another time pretty quickly after that. And then they mention it, I think, 2 more times. This last one worked better because you're like, okay, that's kind of the equivalent to the other scene. But there was one time when I think they had their first battle together where, Steve's like, it's time for my dance lessons or whatever, or like, let's dance or whatever. And,
it was like Stark built me new dancing shoes or something.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yep. And I felt like that was a little bit too much over the head at times, which with how quick in succession they were, because I think the reason why is because that is one of the most identifiable things between like Peggy and Steve relationship, and how often like that's like a little callback for it. But when it's 33 minutes, like having it 4 references to it, it's like, okay, we get it. Like we know this is their thing. We know that this is what they like to do. But yeah, so those were my only 2 ones. Did you have any little things that you wanted to pick up?
I mean, I had a question that you might know the answer to on this that I might just be forgetting about. But with the Tesseract, when Peggy sacrifices herself, right, and she goes inside of it in the scene where Fury and Hawkeye are opening the portal back, she comes out, and then there's like, a ton of tentacle pieces that pop out with her. So is she like what? Because my understanding of the Tesseract is always like it's this thing that you can use to travel between different places. It's the space stone, right? So
yeah,
that's how it works. So is she just like trapped inside of another dimension? Like what's happening at that point?
I don't know. I felt like it should have been. It's actually. I mean, she must have chopped off the rest of the squid, right?
Right.
Or is it the Tesseract killing it when it? Well, I guess not, because it came through fine, right? So she had to have been somewhere where she's able to continue cutting it. But I think the way I read it is almost like a continuous thing. So she leaves, pushing it back, is chopping it up, and then boom, she appears here. Like I don't think it was
all right.
like where she was stuck. I think for her, time went linear, and it was only like a few minutes, and that's why she's like, what, 70 years?
All right. Yeah, that was my only thing, because just from what we knew about this space stone and how we've seen it be used in other shows, movies, it seems very much like a teleportation device more than like something that you can like teleport to another place and then it abstracts time. But I suppose given the amount of dimensions that abstract time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point, like it's not that out of the question that happens.
Yeah, it's a good question though, because I think that's something that gets lost with the short runtime is it happened real quick.
Right.
That,
like with Steve Rogers going into the ice, like it's pretty self-explanatory, kind of.
Yeah,
I guess
they saw him out, and
he got frozen.
still alive.
Yeah. So that makes sense. It's a little bit more difficult to explain. Like, oh yeah, it's in like a few seconds. Like, oh yeah, there was this other dimension. She was fighting it. Time didn't move that the same way that it does here. Like, I would have appreciated, I guess, if like they had thrown in something sort of like akin to what Ant-Man does in Endgame, where he's like, for me, it was 5 hours or whatever, like 5 years for you. For me, it was 5 hours, that kind of thing, just to kind of give a perspective on how time passed there. That's a very minor nitpick, but I think it would have gone a long way.
Yeah, no, I think I can agree with that as well. So I wanted to go over just some quick trivia as well before we get into theories.
All
so
right.
Trivia, obviously, What If you're not familiar, is based on a popular comic line that premiered in 1977 that would take certain situations and them. So some of the famous examples from those first run comics in the late 70s is what if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four? What if Gwen Stacy had lived? What if Wolverine defeats the Hulk? Because usually Hulk defeats Wolverine in those battles. So those are like some ones like that. There's also more ones as well out there. So vary what they are, and that's what we'll kind of see, I think, in the show. Watchers, they are a race of fictional extraterrestrials. So they, according to Wikipedia, are commonly depicted as all-powerful beings who watch over fictional multiverses that the stories take place in and are not allowed to interact with other characters, though they have done so on several occasions when the situation demanded it. I did want to say they also appear at the end credits of the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 in the end credit scene when Stan Lee is on like the space planet with them. And he talks about his time as like a UPS man or FedEx man.
Right.
That is the Watchers, if you're not familiar with that, any listeners there. And the Watcher we are introduced to is Watu, who is the Watcher assigned to watch over Earth. And he is an altruist and has bent or violated his oath numerous occasions to aid humanity. So he's a good guy.
Well, in the eyes of humans, not in the eyes of the Watchers.
Yeah. So go ahead. You've read some What If comics leading up to this. Just which ones did you read, and what were your thoughts on those?
Not too much of them. I just read a little bit of the What If Civil War one from 2007, and the big takeaway that I have is like, the line at the end, exact same. I am Watu the Watcher, and I will not, cannot intervene and that kind of thing, setting it up. And it's funny because like Jordan was saying when he was talking about the Watchers, Uatu intervenes a lot, and I'll get into that more when we get to theories. I'll let him finish up the trivia first, but I mean the What If Civil War comic was pretty interesting as well. Honestly, could probably take a full episode to go through that kind of stuff, but it's a fun comic for sure. Yeah, I've only read a few so far since I came on the episode last, but yeah, it's definitely a fun read.
Yeah, that was actually it for the trivia. So if you wanted to go into any more intro, you can. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as theories go, with Uatu the Watcher, what I've been seeing a lot of people talking about, and what I could see as like being something, is how he could be used to kind of wrap up phase 4 of the MCU, moving into like kind of almost a trilogy-esque thing, like what they did in the first 3 phases of the MCU, where they're setting up for a big bad. And, he could be used in this sort of way, intervening at the end of phase 3 and warning the Avengers or whatever group is left at this point, the Avengers, whoever makes up that group, of a massive threat coming, like, say, Kang the Conqueror, Galactus, something like that. He could warn them, and because, in the comics, when Uatu intervenes, you kind of know it's a big deal because it's breaking his oath. So it could be interesting in that way. It could lead to like, maybe a spin-off series in phase 4 about Uatu or something like that. But I think that he could be used to introduce the next big bad to the MCU, because we see that at the end of phase 1 of the MCU, where Avengers introduces you to Thanos. Of course, it's not the same refined version of Thanos that we see. He's a lot more purple initially, but we could be seeing something like that where, and I'd be all for that, because it would be a perfect way to kind of tie in What If to the MCU. So I'm interested to see how that progresses, and if that end line changes at all during it, because I'll be watching that carefully. I'll be watching that scene carefully.
Yeah, I think I think we could see him in live action at some point. There was rumors of this show getting a second season as well. That they're already working on that. So, if people have watched Bad Batch for Star Wars, they already announced that's getting a second season next year, and animation needs a long lead up time, which means that they already knew that they were getting a second season before this season premiered. So if that's the same case for What If, then they're already working on it. They're already doing whatever they can on it. What's interesting, and I don't know how much I want to get into leaks here, but there were some merchandise that leaked called Guardians of the Multiverse, and it had Captain Carter, and it had like T'Challa, Star-Lord, and it had a few of these other versions of the characters we're going to see. What we're led to believe in this show is that these are all different universes, and that's going to be true. I think we're going to see universes for each of these characters, but somehow these characters are probably going to end up meeting. And it's in the trailer too. I mean, the trailer shows like T'Challa, Star-Lord with Gamora, with Peggy Carter, and it does like the replicating of the scene in Avengers 2012 where, they're doing that 360 spin around them. So I think that this show is going to somehow, there's going to be an overarching arc. And I think this Tesseract part, while it might seem out of place with this, I think that might hold the key of how they're going to have some of these characters meet each other or something. I think that, there's probably a reason why it was an interdimensional squid type thing, is that they're somehow going to be able to have this, change where they're able to kind of meet up with each other and become like a guardians of the multiverse. And I think what we were talking about off the air and what I was alluding to with the Loki stuff. So if you haven't watched Loki, you can turn us off now. But if you watch Loki, at the end when Sylvie kills He Who Remains and the timelines start branching, if you look at the Disney Plus website right now and you go to the MCU section and you go to the MCU in timeline order, it now shows Endgame, then Loki, then What If, and WandaVision, and Falcon and Winter Soldier. So before, when we only had WandaVision, of course, that was right after Endgame. Then Falcon and the Winter Soldier came out and was after WandaVision. Then Loki came out, and they're like, that goes right after Endgame. Probably because that, his journey starts kind of in the middle of the movie, right? And then you have What If, which I think is showing us now that this is because of the events of Loki and the timelines branching. We now have a multiverse. There's no more the sacred timeline. We're starting to get branched out here. If you want to look up rumors of Spider-Man No Way Home and how that's probably going to link in with this, or Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, I think that is kind of where we're going with this right now, is these multiverse stuff. And we were to He Who Remains. He's told us about his variants, one of those being Kang the Conqueror. We know Jonathan Majors is showing up in Ant-Man Quantumania, Ant-Man and the Wasp Mania. So I think Kang is it, right? I think there's two storylines going on here. I think it's going to be Kang and multiverse, and then I think you're going to have the grounded storyline going on with, if you've seen Black Widow, Yelena from Black Widow taking over for Natasha, and then she's kind of getting roped into this John Walker Valentina storyline. So I think you're going to kind of have two storylines: the cosmic storyline of the multiverse, and then you're going to have the grounded storyline that we're going to see probably like Captain America 4 go into, and John Walker and Black Widow type stuff. So I'm not sure if Uatu will come and kind of warn about Kang, because I feel like we've already kind of been introduced to Kang. Now the Avengers don't know him at this point. Only Loki has had any sort of run-in with He Who Remains, and I don't know if we're seeing Loki until season 2 now, because he's kind of stuck in that other TVA with run by Kang. So I don't know how we're getting him back to tell anybody anything right now. But ultimately, that was long-winded. But I kind of think that's the path we're on with this show, with the MCU right now.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, just to further lend credibility to the idea that this is directly a result from Loki is at the very beginning, the kind of monologue that Uatu the Watcher gives. He's like, I'm your guide through these new universes. And, combined with the fact that it's listed after Loki in chronological order and the fact that it says new universes kind of gives credibility to this idea that, hey, these are all different multiverses that are branching off because of Sylvie's choice to kill He Who Remains. And I think that makes it real, like that's the biggest link between it, because just everything combined together just seems to point in that direction. And I hope so. I hope this isn't a situation like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where it's like, oh yeah, it's canon, and then like a few years down the line, they're like, actually, we'd like to retract that statement. It's definitely not canon. And
I think what you can get away with here is the fact that these are alternate universes, that Feige and co. can pretty much ignore most of this stuff if they want to, but they can say that's still going on. And it's produced by Marvel Studios, so I don't think we're going to have that issue the way we do with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Unfortunately, that was kind of, if you don't know any of if people listening don't know any of the, with how Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and like Marvel TV and Ike Perlmutter and all that background information and the fights that Perlmutter had with Feige, and how Feige was ready to pretty much walk away unless if Perlmutter could be kind of reined back, and Iger took Feige's side. Feige was pumping out hit after hit after hit, and there's a whole bunch of background there, and that was pretty much a casualty of that was was Agents of Shield. I do think originally the idea was let's make it canon. Well, they even had Sam Jackson on in the first episode or two. So
yeah,
they even had Lady Sif on in season 1. So there was definitely that idea there. And then when the feud between the TV side and film side became really big, it just kind of became an unfortunate casualty, because I really did enjoy Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as well.
It was a pretty good show, but like, yeah, all of the stuff that they were planning in this phase, like, you know, the Darkhold being in the hands of Agatha for WandaVision, like that wouldn't have been possible if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was still canon. And ultimately, you know, some money calculations came in, and it's like, well, we have a few TV shows that made us some money versus these movies, which have made us billions of dollars. Like, easy decision that they had. But yeah, it's unfortunate casualty for sure. But just another thing on that kind of leaks train that we were kind of getting onto a little bit. I'm a huge Lego fan as well as like Marvel fan. And they actually released a few weeks ago, they announced this kind of idea of Lego minifigures. They have like these collectible minifigures that they release in blind bags, sort of $5 a piece, and it's tons of characters from the shows that are coming out. So it kind of gives you some looks inside of some things that have maybe not been revealed yet on What If. I mean, most of them have. Like, you have figures of T'Challa as Star-Lord. You have Captain Carter with the Tesseract in there. You've got, of course, people from Loki and from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, from WandaVision. There's Spider-Man as Doctor Strange. I'm not sure if that's like a revealed one.
Yes,
yet.
that is in What If.
Okay.
The plot line, I think, is supposed to be that the cloak from Doctor Strange leaves him. Maybe something happens to him, but goes and finds Peter and attaches himself to Peter as Spider-Man. So I think that's kind of what we're doing. I don't know what episode that's supposed to be in. Some people have been able to kind of place where these episodes are going to be based on some leaks, I think, as well. I think episode 2 is the T'Challa one.
I think that would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Zombie one is later in the season, supposedly. And actually, if you look at the What If like picture that they have, like the thumbnail, you can see Spider-Man with the cloak there. There's also this interesting Ultron looking one with the Infinity Stones on his chest. I don't know what that is.
Interesting. Are you looking at the?
Yeah, click, like, if you go on a Disney Plus and click What If, and it takes you to the episode page, there's like that background thing. Yeah, that's where you can see the Ultron one. The Spider-Man one is on the thumbnail before you click What If. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just letting it load up on here. But yeah, I'm seeing that sort of thing on here. I see the Captain America and Hawkeye as zombies on there.
Yeah.
I'm seeing Gamora as Thanos, it looks like. And yeah, I don't know what that Ultron could be about.
Is that supposed to be like, because his face kind of looks like Vision, is that supposed to be when he took, like, when he's having Vision's body made for him? Maybe that's where they're going on that one. I don't know. But it's very Ultron-like. It's very, like, it looks Ultron-ish.
Yeah, potentially that's what we're looking at with this. So that'll be interesting to see about where that ends up going.
If he's a good guy or a bad guy, we don't really know. Huh. Interesting. So the Spider-Man with the cloak is called Zombie Hunter Spider-Man. So he's going to be in the zombie episode.
Oh, okay. I see. That I'm looking forward to that one as well, for sure.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, I didn't see these minifigs, but
yeah, I'm looking forward to them because I'm a huge fan of Lego. These are pretty cool minifigures. The Falcon one looks really sick with the new costume.
Yeah.
If you see with the Loki one, he has Frog Thor with him as well,
yeah,
which is kind of a cool little thing. I'm looking forward to those. I'm definitely going to be heading to a Lego store and kind of trying to find those on day one, I think.
Certainly. Let's see. Anything else we want to talk about with What If? I don't think I have anything else to mention.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to mention. I've talked about the theories that I think are happening. I'm excited for the next episode to happen and seeing which story we get a look into next, That'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah, me too. This is going to be, I think, a lot of fun. I think this show, it's 10 episodes, supposedly.
I think it was supposed to be 10, and I heard that it became 9 because production got cut off because of the pandemic. So they're making 2 seasons with 9. That's what I've heard. Nothing has been confirmed on that yet, but that's sort of what I've heard.
Yeah, no, I had not heard that. That's interesting. So I guess we'll see. I don't know if they've made any announcements on how long the show is.
Yeah, I don't think there has been
and stuff.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jack, for coming on. Do you want to say to anybody where they can find you or follow you?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can look at my Twitter at JSewpersaud16. I post a little bit about Marvel on there, some soccer and some other stuff on there. But if you're interested in soccer stuff, then you can check out at Final Third Show. That's a podcast that I do with my friend AJ on there. We've had Jordan on a few times in there, so you can check us out on either of those.
All right, yeah, and if you want to follow the show, you can follow the show on Twitter at TO Infinity Saga, Facebook.com/Infinity Saga Beyond. There's also a link tree in the notes below, or you can email us, marvelplusrecaps@gmail.com, if you want to give us your thoughts on What If. But thanks, Jack, for coming on, and maybe we'll have you on for episode 2.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to be on there.
All right. Well, thanks for listening and have a great rest of your day.